Among the hills of Santa Catarina, a light ignites. Blessed Albertina Berkenbrock, the heroine of chastity. In the heart of Santa Catarina, where the hills stretch like green waves to the horizon and the air carries the scent of wildflowers, lies a small community that holds one of the most precious treasures of Brazilian faith. São Luís, in the interior of Heroine, seems like just another one of the many settlements born from the courage of German immigrants who crossed the ocean in search of a better life. But there's something special about this land, something that transcends the natural beauty of its golden fields and the simplicity of its wooden houses. It is here that a girl was born whose name would echo through the centuries, whose example of purity and courage would illuminate humanity's darkest paths. It was the year 1919, and the world was still healing the wounds of the Great War. In Brazil, the old republic was drawing its last breaths, while in the German colonies of the south, hard-working families cultivated not only the land, but also a deep and unshakable faith. The 20th century was dawning with its promises of progress and modernity, but in the rural corners of Santa Catarina, time seemed to flow at a different pace, slower, more contemplative, where every sunrise was a blessing and every sunset an invitation to prayer. It was in this setting of bucolic peace that Henrique and Maria Berkenbrock received the most precious gift God could bestow upon them. Little Albertina came into the world on an autumn morning, April 11th, when the leaves of the trees painted the landscape with golden and reddish hues. Her first cries echoed through the modest wooden house, announcing not just the birth of another child, but the arrival of someone destined to leave an indelible mark on the history of the church and in the memory of the Brazilian people. The descendants of German immigrants who populated those lands knew well the value of hard work, honesty, and Christian faith. Henrique, a man whose hands were calloused from labor in the fields, and Maria, a woman with a tender heart and strong spirit, were the perfect reflection of this cultural and spiritual heritage. Their lives were simple, yet rich in love and dedication to family. They didn't possess great fortunes, but they had something far more valuable, a genuine faith that permeated every moment of their existence, from the first morning prayers to the last Hail Marys of the night. The Berkenbrock home breathed this atmosphere of everyday sacredness. The light wooden walls witnessed whispered prayers at the foot of small oratories, where images of saints looked tenderly upon the family growing under divine protection. The aroma of bread baked in the wood-fired oven mingled with the incense of evening prayers, creating an olfactory symphony that would forever be etched in the memory of those who lived there. It was a home where God was not just a Sunday visitor, but a constant presence, a faithful companion in joys and a comforter in difficulties. Albertina grew up in this environment like a flower blooming naturally under the spring sun. From her very first steps, her personality radiated a special light, a sweetness that touched the hearts of everyone who knew her. It wasn't just her captivating childlike beauty, but something deeper, a purity of soul that manifested in every gesture, every smile, every word uttered by her small, rosy lips. Mornings in the community of São Luís started early, with the roosters crowing breaking the silence of dawn. The Berkenbrock family woke up before the sun rose, and Albertina, even as the youngest, quickly learned to participate in this morning ritual. Her bare feet scurried across the wooden floor of the house as she helped her mother prepare breakfast and organized her small household chores. Even at this tender age, she showed surprising maturity, a sense of responsibility that impressed the adults around her. The fields around the house stretched like a green sea, dotted with the vibrant colors of wildflowers that bloomed spontaneously in the fertile soil. It was in this setting that Albertina spent much of her days, playing with her siblings, helping with farm chores, and discovering the small miracles that nature offered at every moment. Her small hands quickly learned to distinguish useful plants from weeds, Her ears became accustomed to the sounds of the countryside, and her eyes developed that special perception that only those who live in communion with the earth can acquire. But what truly set Albertina apart from other children her age was her natural inclination for prayer and contemplation. While playing, she was often found whispering little prayers, talking to God as if speaking to an intimate friend. Her ragdolls witnessed childish sermons, where she reproduced the words of the parish priest, blending the innocence of childhood with a wisdom that seemed to come from a divine source. The main church of São Luís became Albertina's second home. The whole family religiously attended Sunday masses, but she showed a special fervor that caught everyone's attention. Her small hands joined in prayer with a devotion that touched the hearts of the faithful, and her eyes shone with a particular light when she contemplated the tabernacle. The parish priest soon realized there was something extraordinary about that girl, a divine spark that promised great things for the future. The rosary became Albertina's inseparable companion. The beads, worn smooth from frequent use, passed between her small fingers with impressive naturalness as she meditated on the mysteries of the lives of Jesus and Mary. It was not an imposed or artificial devotion, but an inner need, a thirst for communion with the divine that manifested spontaneously and constantly. Her Hail Marys echoed through the house like a soft melody, bringing peace and serenity to all family members. The community of São Luís watched Albertina's growth with a mixture of admiration and hope. In difficult times, when the challenges of rural life presented themselves with greater intensity, the presence of that special girl seemed to bring supernatural comfort. Her neighbors began to notice that wherever Albertina went, joy settled in, conflicts eased, and faith strengthened. It was as if she carried a piece of heaven with her, sharing this grace with everyone around her. The seasons followed one another, bringing their characteristic colors and temperatures, and Albertina grew like a tree that sends deep roots into the fertile soil of faith. Each spring witnessed her physical and spiritual development. Each summer consolidated her sweet and generous personality. Each autumn deepened her precocious maturity, and each winter strengthened her resilience and determination. Gradually, the girl transformed into a young teenager, keeping her most precious qualities intact, but also acquiring the strength and courage that would be necessary for the supreme challenge destiny held for her. The pure air of the Santa Catarina mountains seemed to nourish not only her lungs, but also her soul. Albertina breathed holiness, as if it were the oxygen needed to live, and exhaled that same holiness in every act of her daily existence. Her life unfolded in simplicity, but a simplicity full of meaning, where every moment was an opportunity to serve God and neighbor. Every gesture was a silent offering. Every word was a seed of good sown in the hearts of those who heard her. Thus grew Albertina Berkenbrock among the verdant hills of Santa Catarina, under the blue sky that seemed to particularly bless that region. Surrounded by the love of a Christian family and the protection of a community that was beginning to realize it held an invaluable treasure in its hands. No one could have imagined that this sweet and pious girl was being prepared by divine providence for an act of heroism that would echo through the centuries, transforming her into a luminous example of purity and courage for all future generations. The first years of Albertina Berkenbrock's life unfolded like a poem written by the gentle hand of divine providence. In small São Luís, each dawn brought with it the promise of a day full of discoveries, learning, and spiritual growth. The Berkenbrock family home awoke with the first rays of sun filtering through the wooden windows, creating golden patterns on the simple but always impeccably clean floor. Henrique Berkenbrock was a man of few words, but eloquent gestures. His hands, calloused from working the fields, told the story of a life dedicated to honestly supporting his family. He would rise before dawn to care for the animals and prepare the land for planting. Albertina, from a very young age, accompanied her father in these morning activities, observing with curious and attentive eyes every movement, every care given to the plants and animals. It was a silent but profoundly effective education, teaching by example the value of work, patience, and responsibility. Maria Berkenbrock, in turn, was the pulsating heart of the home. A strong woman, descendant of the courageous German immigrants who left their homeland in search of better opportunities, she knew how to transmit to her children not only the cultural traditions of her ancestors, but more importantly, the Christian values that guided her existence. Her skilled hands cared for the house, prepared meals, and most importantly, taught Albertina and her siblings their first prayers. Little Albertina absorbed these teachings like a sponge absorbs water. Her childlike heart seemed to have an extraordinary capacity to understand and experience the mysteries of faith in a way that impressed even the most experienced adults. When she was only 3 years old, she could already recite several prayers by heart, not as mere mechanical repetition, but with a devotion and understanding that deeply touched anyone who heard her. The daily routine of the Berkenbrock family followed the natural rhythm of the countryside and the seasons. They woke up early, participated in family prayer, had a simple but nutritious breakfast, and then each person carried out their specific tasks. Albertina, even as a child, had her small responsibilities, helping her mother in the kitchen, taking care of her younger siblings, feeding the chickens, and keeping her small space in the house organized. She performed everything with joy and dedication, transforming each household chore into an act of love and service. Sundays were special days in the family's life. Preparation for Mass began the day before, with special care given to clothes and tidying up the house. Albertina participated in these preparations with contagious enthusiasm, polishing the family's shoes until they shined like mirrors, and helping her mother prepare the best outfits for the weekly encounter with God at the parish church. Her joy was so great that it spread to the whole family, turning even the most mundane tasks into moments of celebration. The walk to the main church was always a small family procession. Albertina walked hand in hand with her parents, carefully observing the surrounding landscape and commenting on the flowers blooming along the way. Her childlike questions revealed a curiosity not only natural, but also spiritual. "Mommy, why did God make the flowers so beautiful?" "Daddy, do the little birds also pray to Jesus?" These were questions that demonstrated a restless mind and a heart already attuned to the sacred. During Masses, Albertina's behavior drew the attention of the entire community. While other children her age were easily distracted or caused small disturbances, she remained focused, actively participating in the liturgy within her childlike capabilities. Her responses to prayers were clear and fervent. Her moments of silence were deep and respectful, and her posture during the consecration revealed an intuitive understanding of the sacredness of that moment. The parish priest, an experienced man who had witnessed the spiritual growth of many families, soon realized there was something extraordinary about Albertina. One time, after Mass, he approached the Berkenbrock family and commented to Maria, "Madam, your daughter has a special light in her eyes. Take good care of this child, for God has important plans for her." Prophetic words that were etched in the mother's heart as a premonition of great things to come. Afternoons at the Berkenbrock home were moments of relative rest, when the family gathered after lunch for a brief period of togetherness before returning to their field activities. It was during these moments that Albertina demonstrated her natural vocation for spiritual leadership. She gathered her younger siblings and organized small prayer sessions, recreating in miniature the ceremonies she witnessed in church. Her childlike voice led religious songs, her small hands distributed imaginary blessings, and her pure heart transformed those games into true moments of spiritual edification. The evening rosary became a sacred tradition in the Berkenbrock family, and Albertina was always the first to fetch her small string of beads. She would sit on the living room floor, legs crossed and face turned towards the small family oratory, and lead the prayers with a seriousness and devotion that deeply moved her parents. Her sweet voice whispered the Hail Marys like a celestial melody, and her meditations on the mysteries of the Rosary revealed an impressive spiritual depth for her tender age. The seasons brought different opportunities for growth and learning for Albertina. In spring, she discovered with enchantment the rebirth of nature, drawing spontaneous parallels with the resurrection of Christ. In summer, she took advantage of the longer days to expand her prayer and contemplation activities. Autumn taught her about the beauty of transformation and preparation for more difficult times, and winter, with its characteristic cold of the Santa Catarina lands, developed in her the resilience and strength that would be fundamental in her future path. Albertina grew not only in physical stature, but primarily in wisdom and grace before God and men. Her reputation as a special girl spread throughout the community, and it was not uncommon to see neighbors seeking out the Berkenbrock family to ask the little one to pray for their specific intentions. These requests were always met with joy and generosity, and Albertina took her responsibility as an intercessor very seriously, dedicating special time in her prayers for each person who requested her prayers. Albertina's formal education began in the small community school, where she learned her first letters and numbers. Her natural intelligence manifested in the ease with which she absorbed content. But what most impressed the teachers was her ability to relate all her learning to her faith. Math lessons transformed into reflections on the divine order of creation. Portuguese classes became opportunities to memorize biblical passages, and natural science disciplines awakened in her an even greater fascination with God's wisdom manifested in nature. But it was during a lesson about the lives of the saints that Albertina first demonstrated her vocation for Christian heroism. The teacher was recounting the story of Saint Cecilia, the young Roman martyr who preferred death to denying her faith, when Albertina raised her hand and asked a question that surprised everyone. "Teacher, if someone wanted to make me deny Jesus, could I also be as brave as Saint Cecilia?" The question hung in the air like a silent prophecy, and the educator, perceiving the child's seriousness, responded with emotion. "Albertina, God gives special strength to those who have true faith like yours." Albertina's childhood years unfolded in this way, woven with the golden threads of simplicity, faith, and family love. Each day brought new opportunities for spiritual growth. Each experience transformed into a rung on the ladder that would lead her to holiness. Her personality solidified as a perfect synthesis between feminine sweetness and Christian fortitude, between childlike innocence and spiritual maturity, between everyday simplicity and the grandeur of divine purposes. When she turned 10, Albertina was already recognized by the entire community as a special girl, blessed by God with extraordinary gifts of piety and wisdom. Her parents observed her growth with a mixture of pride and foreboding, realizing that God was preparing their daughter for something great, something that would transcend the limits of little São Luís and reach much greater dimensions. They did not yet know that it was preparation for an act of heroism that would place her in the pantheon of Christian martyrs. But they intuited that Albertina's life had a special purpose in the plans of divine providence. At 12 years old, Albertina Berkenbrock had transformed into a young teenager who harmoniously combined the natural grace of youth with a spiritual maturity that continued to surprise everyone around her. Her body grew with the typical elegance of girls her age, but it was her soul that truly drew attention, radiating a light that seemed to come directly from heaven. The Berkenbrock family's routine had naturally adapted to Albertina's new needs and capabilities. She now took on greater responsibilities in managing the household, caring for her younger siblings with a maternal dedication that touched the heart of Maria, her mother. It was common to see her in the morning organizing the little ones for school, checking if they were properly fed, with clean clothes and school supplies in order. She did all this without being asked, driven by a natural instinct for service and family love. Fieldwork also gained a new dimension with Albertina's more active participation. Her hands, still delicate but already strengthened by daily labor, helped with harvesting, planting and caring for the animals. Enrique observed his daughter's dedication with paternal pride, noting that she transformed each task into an opportunity for prayer and contemplation. While working in the fields, Albertina whispered religious songs or recited passages from the Holy Scriptures she had memorized, creating an atmosphere of sacredness that sanctified manual labor. But it was during the daily fetching of water from the spring that Albertina found her most precious moments of solitude and communion with God. The spring was a considerable distance from the house, requiring a walk of approximately 20 minutes each way. Albertina transformed this path into a true personal via crucis, establishing specific points along the way where she would stop to pray, meditate, or simply contemplate the beauty of divine creation. The spring itself was a special place, surrounded by lush vegetation and frequented by small wild animals that seemed not to fear the young girl's presence. Albertina developed an almost Franciscan-like relationship with these creatures, whispering to them and sharing small pieces of bread she always carried with her. It was as if nature recognized in her a kindred spirit, someone who intuitively understood the silent language of creation. During these moments at the spring, Albertina used to prolong her prayers, taking advantage of the silence and natural beauty to connect more deeply with God. Her knees left marks on the damp earth around the spring, testifying to the long hours she spent there in contemplation. Neighbors who occasionally found her on these occasions later recounted to their families the supernatural impression seeing her pray made. She seemed like a saint in ecstasy, completely absorbed in the divine presence. Albertina's spiritual life continued to deepen in an impressive way. Her Marian devotion grew to the point where she established a daily routine of several recitations of the Rosary, each dedicated to specific intentions: for the conversion of sinners, for the souls in purgatory, for the sanctification of priests, for world peace. Her Rosary beads wore out quickly due to intense use, and Maria frequently had to replace them with new ones. Albertina's participation in Sunday Masses took on even more striking characteristics. She always arrived among the first faithful and remained until the last visitor left the church. During the celebrations, her concentration was complete. She followed every gesture of the priest, responded to prayers with fervor, and during the consecration, her face took on an expression of reverence and adoration that moved everyone present. Many faithful reported that observing Albertina during Mass helped them concentrate better and experience the celebrated mysteries with greater intensity. After Masses, Albertina would usually remain a few minutes in silent prayer before the tabernacle. These moments were of intimate communion with Eucharistic Jesus, and her body posture revealed the depth of her mystical experience. She remained motionless, with her hands clasped and her gaze fixed on the tabernacle, as if maintaining a silent but intense dialogue with her Lord. The parish priest himself began to observe these moments with special attention, recognizing in them signs of extraordinary grace. Albertina's generosity towards the needy also became increasingly evident. The region was going through a period of economic hardship, with some families facing true destitution. Albertina, perceiving these needs with her characteristic sensitivity, began to organize small charitable actions, convincing her family to set aside food and clothes for distribution to the most needy. One time, she learned of a neighboring family who was starving due to the unemployment of the head of the household. Without hesitation, Albertina gathered everything she could find in the family pantry and left home with a basket full of provisions. When Maria noticed the absence of several important food items for the family, she was initially concerned, but upon discovering the food's destination, she felt a mixture of pride and admiration for her daughter's generosity. "God will provide for us too," Albertina said when questioned about her action, demonstrating a trust in divine providence that was impressive for its maturity. Albertina's reputation for holiness began to spread beyond the borders of little São Luís. People from neighboring communities came specifically to meet her, talk with her, or simply observe her during her prayers. These visitors invariably left edified by their contact with the young girl, later reporting the feeling of peace and spiritual upliftment they experienced in her presence. A particularly striking episode occurred when a woman from the surrounding area, distressed by her young son's serious illness, sought out Albertina asking for her prayers. The young girl not only promised to pray for the child, but insisted on accompanying the mother to the sick child's house. Upon arriving there, she knelt beside the child's bed and began a prayer so fervent and touching that everyone present began to cry with emotion. The next day, the boy showed significant improvement, and in a few days, he was completely cured. News of this event spread rapidly through the region, further increasing the veneration people felt for Albertina. Despite all this special attention, Albertina remained humble and simple, never allowing others' praise or admiration to affect her personality. She continued to perform her household chores with the same dedication, to treat everyone with equal affection and respect, and to consider herself merely an instrument in God's hands. This genuine humility, far from diminishing her spiritual influence, actually enhanced it, making her presence even more attractive and edifying. During this period, Albertina also developed a special devotion to purity and chastity. She often talked with her mother about the importance of preserving innocence and bodily dignity as a pleasing offering to God. Her reflections on this subject revealed a surprising maturity and understanding for her age, as if she already sensed that this virtue would play a fundamental role in her spiritual journey. "Mom," she once said, "I want to always be clean outside and inside, so that Jesus can dwell in me without finding anything that displeases him." Words that were engraved in Maria's heart as a premonition of the heroic destiny awaiting her dear daughter. The morning of June 15, 1931, dawned like so many others in the small community of São Luís. The sun rose, painting the horizon with soft shades of pink and gold. The birds began their morning chorus, and the Berkenbrock family awoke to another day of work and prayer. Nothing in the atmosphere suggested that this would be the most significant day in Albertina's life, and that it would become a sacred date in the history of the church in Brazil. Albertina got up with her usual joy, participated in morning family prayers, helped prepare breakfast, and performed her household chores with the same dedication as always. During breakfast, she chatted animatedly with her siblings about the day's plans, demonstrating the naturalness and spontaneity typical of a 12-year-old teenager. Nothing in her behavior revealed a premonition of the approaching drama. Around mid-morning, the family noticed that one of their pets had wandered away from the property. It was a small pig, raised almost as a family mascot, which used to roam freely around the land, but always returned for meals. Its prolonged absence worried everyone, especially because the animal could get lost in the surrounding woods or be attacked by predators. Albertina, with her generous heart and keen sense of responsibility, immediately offered to look for the missing animal. She knew all the paths and trails in the region well, had an excellent relationship with neighbors who could help in the search, and her presence usually calmed animals, making their capture easier. Her parents, trusting in their daughter's prudence and ability, consented to the initiative. Albertina left home with readiness and confidence, following the known trails and affectionately calling out for the lost animal. She visited the neighboring properties, talked with some residents she met along the way, but did not obtain information about the piglet's whereabouts. She then decided to expand the search area, heading to more distant places where the animal might have hidden. It was during this search, in a relatively isolated area of the property, that Albertina encountered a man known to the family. He was someone the Berkenbrocks trusted, a person who occasionally frequented their home and had always shown respectful and friendly behavior. The presence of this familiar person initially reassured Albertina, who approached naturally, believing she had found someone who could assist her in looking for the lost animal. The man greeted Albertina with apparent normalcy, asked about the reason for her presence in that isolated location, and listened attentively to the explanation about the search for the missing animal. For a few minutes, the conversation proceeded cordially and naturally. Albertina, confident in the integrity of the person she was speaking with, lowered her guard and focused on the detailed explanation of her attempts to find the lost animal. But suddenly, without any warning or provocation, the situation changed drastically. The man revealed his true intentions, approaching Albertina menacingly and demonstrating purposes that terrified the young girl. What had until then seemed a casual and harmless encounter transformed into the most terrible nightmare a girl her age could face. Albertina immediately understood the gravity of the situation. Her mind, despite her youth, quickly processed what was happening and what was expected of her. At that crucial moment, all her Christian education, all her moral formation, and all her devotion to purity crystallized into a firm and irrevocable decision. She would never give in, no matter the consequences. "No!" Albertina cried out with a strength that surprised both herself and her assailant. "I will never do that. I'd rather die." Her words echoed through the surrounding woods like a battle cry, a shout of courage that announced her willingness to fight to the end for the preservation of her dignity and purity. The aggressor, surprised by the young woman's firm resistance, tried to intimidate her with threats and violence, but Albertina did not back down. On the contrary, her resistance intensified. She screamed for help, physically fought against her attacker, and constantly repeated her categorical refusal to yield to the perverse desires being imposed upon her. Each scream was a prayer. Each defensive movement was an act of faith. Each word of refusal was an affirmation of her fidelity to Christ. The struggle lasted for several agonizing minutes. Albertina used all the strength of her young body to resist, but above all, she mobilized all the energy of her soul to remain firm in her decision. She knew she was at a physical disadvantage, but her moral determination was unshakable. She preferred death 1,000 times over dishonor, martyrdom over the betrayal of her Christian principles. Realizing that he could not break the young woman's iron will, and fearing that her screams would attract help, the aggressor made the fatal decision. If he could not possess her, at least he would forever silence her resistance and eliminate the witness to his criminal attempt. With brutal violence, he lethally attacked Albertina, taking her life in a cruel and cowardly manner. Albertina's final moments were of intense communion with God. Even facing death, her lips whispered prayers, her heart remained at peace, and her soul prepared for the definitive encounter with her Lord. She died as she had lived, in a state of grace, in communion with the Almighty, faithful to her Christian principles until her last breath. As the sun began to set on that tragic afternoon, the Berkenbrock family grew uneasy with Albertina's prolonged absence. Enrique organized a search party that covered all known trails, calling out the young woman's name and looking for signs of her passing. The anguish grew with each passing hour without news, and the premonition of tragedy began to settle in the hearts of her family members. It was already evening when they found Albertina's body in a clearing far from the property. The scene was heartbreaking. The young woman lay lifeless, but her face maintained an expression of serenity that contrasted with the violence of the crime. Her hands still firmly held the small rosary she always carried with her, as if she had prayed until the last moment of her earthly existence. News of Albertina's death spread quickly throughout the region, causing widespread commotion. Everyone knew the young woman, everyone knew of her reputation for holiness, and everyone immediately understood that it was a martyrdom. It was not a common crime, but the murder of a young woman who preferred death to the loss of her purity, who chose Christian heroism instead of moral cowardice. Albertina Berkenbrock's funeral transformed into one of the most impressive manifestations of faith that the small town of São Luís had ever witnessed. People from all over the region flocked to pay their last respects to her, who was already considered a martyr. The small parish church proved insufficient to accommodate the multitude of faithful who wished to participate in the funeral ceremony. During the wake, extraordinary phenomena began to be reported by those present. Many claimed to feel a soft and inexplicable perfume emanating from Albertina's body, a fragrance reminiscent of wild flowers mixed with incense. Others reported sensations of deep peace and supernatural comfort merely by being in the presence of the deceased young woman. Some even claimed to have had visions or dreams in which Albertina appeared surrounded by celestial light. Maria Berkenbrock, despite the searing pain of losing her beloved daughter, demonstrated a spiritual fortitude that impressed everyone. During the wake, she remained in constant prayer beside the coffin, interspersing tears of longing with words of acceptance of divine will. "My daughter is with Jesus," she repeated to those who approached to console her. "She chose the most difficult path, but also the most beautiful. Now she is a saint in heaven." Enrique, a man of few words, expressed his pain through meaningful silence. He remained motionless beside his wife, observing his daughter's serene face and gradually understanding the dimension of heroism she had demonstrated. In his moist eyes, sadness for the separation mingled with pride for Albertina's Christian courage. The community's parish priest, responsible for celebrating the funeral rites, prepared a homily that would remain etched in the memory of all present. He spoke about Christian martyrdom, about the courage of saints, and about the luminous example Albertina had left for all future generations. His words, laden with emotion and conviction, echoed through the packed church as a prophetic proclamation of the young martyr's future beatification. "Albertina did not die," declared the priest with a firm and emotional voice. "She merely passed from this temporal life to eternal life, carrying with her the trophy of victory over evil. Her blood shed in defense of purity is a seed of holiness that will germinate in this blessed land for centuries and centuries." After the burial in the community's small cemetery, something extraordinary began to happen. Albertina's tomb quickly became a spontaneous pilgrimage site. People came from distant localities to pray by the young martyr's grave, lay wild flowers on the still fresh earth, and request her intercession for various needs. The first reports of graces obtained through Albertina's intercession emerged just a few days after her death. A child suffering from high and persistent fever was cured after their parents prayed by the young woman's grave. A man who had lost his faith due to family difficulties experienced a sudden and profound conversion during a visit to the cemetery. A sterile woman became pregnant a few months after asking Albertina to intercede for her with God. These phenomena multiplied rapidly, creating a current of devotion that spread throughout Santa Catarina and later to other Brazilian states. Letters arrived daily at the Berkenbrock family, reporting inexplicable cures, impressive conversions, and extraordinary graces attributed to Albertina's intercession. One of the most touching stories involved a family of farmers who were experiencing serious financial difficulties. After praying for 9 consecutive days, asking for Albertina's intercession, they received an unexpected job offer that completely resolved their economic problems. The head of the family, emotional, returned to the tomb to give thanks and left as an ex voto a small wooden image that he himself had sculpted. Another widely discussed grace was the cure of a young woman suffering from advanced tuberculosis. Doctors had given up on the patient, but her desperate mother made a promise to Albertina: if her daughter were cured, she would build a small chapel at the site of the martyrdom. The young woman not only recovered completely, but also dedicated her life to works of charity, and the promised chapel was indeed built a few years later. Devotion to Albertina also produced extraordinary spiritual fruits among the young people of the region. Many teenage girls began to regard her as a model of purity and courage, organizing prayer groups and chastity pledges inspired by her example. Young men also felt challenged by her story, seeking to live with greater moral integrity and actively defending respect for the young women in their communities. Priests from several parishes began to include Albertina's story in their sermons, using her example to teach about the importance of purity, Christian courage, and faithfulness to evangelical principles, even in the face of the greatest adversities. Their words found a special echo among the youth, who naturally identified with the age and circumstances of the young martyr. With the exponential growth of devotion, the Church began to take official notice of the phenomenon. Bishops visited Albertina's tomb, interviewed witnesses of her life and death, and began the first studies on the possibility of a beatification process. The documentation of received graces became more systematic, with detailed records of each report and medical verification of cure cases. In 1953, recognizing the growing importance of the devotion and the need to offer better conditions for pilgrims, the Church authorized the translation of Albertina's mortal remains to the Mother Church of São Luís. The translation ceremony transformed into a grand regional celebration, with the participation of thousands of faithful who came to pay their respects to the young martyr. The decades that followed Albertina's death witnessed the constant and consistent growth of devotion to the young martyr. What had begun as spontaneous veneration from a local community gradually expanded to national and international dimensions. Reports of graces and miracles continued to arrive from all parts of Brazil and even from other countries, demonstrating that Albertina's intercession transcended geographical and cultural boundaries. The Catholic Church, with its traditional prudence and rigor in evaluating possible saints, closely followed this development. Theologians specialized in hagiography studied the accounts of Albertina's life and death. Canon lawyers analyzed the legal aspects of a potential beatification process, and doctors scientifically investigated the cases of cure attributed to her intercession. The first official step in the process occurred in 1985, when the Bishop of Tubarão, Dom Juan Aloísio Hoffmann, officially opened the diocesan phase of Albertina Berkenbrock's cause for beatification. This decision represented the formal recognition by the ecclesiastical hierarchy that there were solid grounds to consider the young woman from Santa Catarina an authentic Christian martyr. During the diocesan phase, which lasted several years, testimonies were collected from people who knew Albertina personally. Dozens of cases of graces received through her intercession were documented, and detailed historical studies were conducted on the circumstances of her life and death. All this material was carefully compiled and subsequently sent to Rome, where it would be submitted for analysis by the Congregation for the Causes of Saints. The Roman process proved to be even more rigorous and time-consuming. Vatican experts meticulously examined every aspect of the cause, from the historical authenticity of the facts to the theological consistency of the martyrdom. Consulting doctors analyzed the most significant healing cases, applying extremely strict scientific criteria to verify whether they were truly phenomena inexplicable by conventional medicine. During this period, devotion to Albertina continued to grow and deepen. Her shrine in São Luís became one of the main pilgrimage centers in southern Brazil, annually receiving thousands of visitors who came seeking spiritual comfort, physical healing, or simply to learn the history of the young martyr. The small community where she was born transformed into an important regional religious hub. Youth groups especially found an inspiring role model for their own lives in Albertina. In an increasingly secularized and permissive world, her story offered an alternative example of moral courage and fidelity to Christian values. Many teenage girls made promises of chastity inspired by her example, and countless young men committed to actively defending feminine dignity in their communities. Albertina's influence was also felt in the field of Christian education. Catholic schools included her biography and religious education curricula, using her story to teach about the fundamental values of Christianity. Books, pamphlets, and audiovisual materials about her life were produced and widely distributed, bringing her example to increasingly larger audiences. Finally, on October 20th, 2007, Pope Benedict XVI signed the decree officially recognizing Albertina Berkenbrock's martyrdom in odium castitatis, in hatred of chastity. This recognition meant that the Church considered it proven that Albertina had been killed specifically for defending her purity, which automatically qualified her for beatification without the need for additional miracle confirmation. The beatification ceremony was scheduled for October 20th, 2007, in the city of Tubarão, Santa Catarina. The event became one of the largest religious demonstrations in the state's history, gathering approximately 25,000 faithful from all over Brazil and various countries. The presence of Cardinal José Saraiva Martins, prefect of the Congregation for the Causes of Saints, as the Pope's personal representative, lent special solemnity to the ceremony. During the celebration, the Cardinal officially proclaimed Albertina Berkenbrock, young martyr of purity, from today onwards be venerated as blessed by the Universal Catholic Church. His words were met with indescribable emotion by those present, many of whom cried tears of joy upon seeing the sanctity of the one they had already venerated for decades officially recognized. Albertina's beatification represented multiple historical milestones. She became the first person born and deceased in Santa Catarina territory to be elevated to the honor of the altars, the youngest martyr beatified in Brazil, and one of the few cases in church history of recognition of martyrdom in odium castitatis outside the context of systematic persecutions of the first Christian centuries. Today, more than 9 decades after her heroic death, Blessed Albertina Berkenbrock continues to exert a profound and transformative influence on the lives of thousands of people around the world. Her shrine in São Luís, now equipped with modern facilities to receive pilgrims, remains a radiating center of faith, hope, and Christian courage. Reports of graces received through the intercession of the young blessed continue to arrive regularly, demonstrating that her heavenly mission remains alive and active. Physical healings, spiritual conversions, family reconciliations, overcoming addictions, protection in times of danger, finding employment, passing exams, the birth of children to sterile couples. The spectrum of graces attributed to Blessed Albertina is impressive in its diversity and consistency. But perhaps Albertina's most important legacy is her example of moral courage in a world that often relativizes fundamental values. In an age where purity is frequently ridiculed, chastity considered old-fashioned, and moral integrity seen as naivete, the young martyr's story offers a powerful testimony that there is something worth living for and, if necessary, dying for. For contemporary young people especially, Albertina represents an alternative model of heroism. It is not the spectacular heroism of fictional superheroes, but the real and accessible heroism of someone who chooses to do what is right, even when it requires sacrifice. Her youth makes this example even more impactful and relatable for teenagers facing their own moral struggles. Albertina's influence also extends to the field of sexual and moral education. Her story is used by Christian educators to teach about the dignity of the human body, the importance of consent, and the value of chastity as an expression of self-love and mutual respect. Far from promoting repression or taboo, her example demonstrates that purity can be lived joyfully, naturally, and liberatingly. Youth movements inspired by Albertina have emerged in various parts of Brazil and the world. These groups gather for prayer, study, recreational activities, and charitable works, with the common denominator being a commitment to living Christian values with authenticity and courage. Many of these young people report that Albertina's example helped them resist social pressures and maintain their moral integrity in difficult situations. Albertina's memory also inspired concrete initiatives for the protection of children and adolescents. Organizations working to combat child sexual abuse frequently invoke her example as a symbol of the need to defend the innocence and dignity of children. Educational campaigns on preventing sexual violence use her story to raise community awareness about the importance of protecting the most vulnerable. In literature, art, and popular culture, the figure of Albertina has begun to appear with increasing frequency. Children's and young adult literature books portray her story in an age-appropriate way. Songs have been composed in her honor, and even an opera was created narrating her heroic journey. These cultural manifestations help perpetuate her memory and make her values accessible to increasingly wider audiences. Albertina's ecumenical impact also deserves mention. Although her beatification is a specifically Catholic recognition, Christians of other denominations also find inspiring elements in her story. Her defense of purity, her courage in the face of adversity, and her fidelity to Christian principles transcend confessional boundaries and touch the hearts of all who value moral integrity. For Christian families, Albertina offers a model of how to raise children in evangelical values without depriving them of the joy and naturalness of childhood. Her biography demonstrates that holiness and happiness are compatible, that purity and spontaneity can go hand in hand, and that a solid Christian education prepares young people to wisely face life's challenges. Albertina's Shrine has also become a center for studies on youth spirituality and Christian pedagogy. Researchers from various universities regularly visit the site to study the phenomenon of devotion to the young blessed and to better understand how her story resonates with the spiritual needs of contemporary young people. The Feast of Blessed Albertina, celebrated annually on June 15th, has become an event of great significance for the entire region. Thousands of pilgrims flock to São Luís on this date, participating in celebrations that combine religious solemnity with festive joy. The program includes solemn masses, processions, cultural presentations, religious craft fairs, and moments of silent prayer at the exact spot where the martyrdom occurred. During these celebrations, it is common to observe moving scenes of gratitude and devotion. People who have received graces through Albertina's intercession arrive at the shrine on their knees. Ex votos, votive offerings, are deposited in large quantities, and tears of joy mingle with songs of praise. The atmosphere of faith and hope breathed in these moments is truly heavenly. Albertina's cause for canonization remains ongoing at the Vatican. Although she is already officially recognized as blessed, the Church is studying the possibility of declaring her a saint, which would require proof of an additional miracle occurring after her beatification. Several extraordinary healings have already been reported and are being investigated by the competent authorities. Regardless of the outcome of this process, What truly matters is that Albertina Berkenbrock has already fulfilled her essential mission: to demonstrate that it is possible to live a life of holiness at any age, in any circumstance, at any time. Her short but intense life continues to light the path for those who seek to live with Christian authenticity in a world often hostile to evangelical values. In the concluding words of this narrative, it's important to recognize that Albertina's story doesn't end with her death, nor even with her beatification. She remains alive in the grateful memory of all those who found in her example the courage needed to face their own moral battles. She continues to be present in the powerful intercession she offers to those who seek her help. She continues to be active in the inspiration she provides to new generations of young Christians. The little girl who was born in the hills of Santa Catarina in 1919 became a spiritual giant whose example transcends geographical, temporal, and cultural boundaries. Her purity of heart, her heroic courage, and her unwavering fidelity to Christ transformed her into a guiding light for all who navigate the sometimes turbulent waters of human existence. Blessed Albertina Berkenbrock, the heroine of chastity, remains forever an eloquent witness that true love sometimes demands supreme sacrifices, but that these sacrifices, when offered to God, transform into inexhaustible sources of grace and blessing for all humanity. Her blessed memory will continue to inspire future generations to always choose the path of good, truth, and beauty, no matter the cost. In little São Luís, where it all began, her name still echoes today in every prayer whispered by the faithful, in every tear of gratitude shed for her graces, in every young person who finds in her story the courage needed to live with dignity and integrity. There, among the same hills that witnessed her first steps, her legacy remains alive, pulsating, eternal. And so, Albertina Berkenbrock's story continues to be written every day, in the hearts of those who invoke her, in the lives of those she transforms, in the hope of those who find in her example the certainty that it is worth being faithful to Christ until the end, no matter how high the price of this faithfulness. Prayer. O blessed Albertina, young martyr of purity and heroine of chastity, who at the age of 12 knew how to defend with your own life the dignity and purity that God had granted you, intercede for us with the Most High. You who grew up in the blessed hills of Santa Catarina, amidst prayers and work, teaching us that holiness can flourish anywhere and at any age, help us to live with the same fidelity to Christian values that marked your brief but luminous existence. O courageous girl who preferred death to dishonor, who chose martyrdom instead of betraying your principles, grant us the grace to be equally firm in our faith and unwavering in our morals. Protect especially the children and adolescents of our time, defending them from all dangers that threaten their innocence and purity. Intercede for Christian families so that they may know how to educate their children in evangelical values, following the example of your parents, Henrique and Maria. Obtain for us from God the courage needed to resist the temptations of the world, the strength to always defend truth and justice, and the perseverance to remain faithful to Christ, even in the face of the greatest adversities. O blessed Albertina, flower of holiness that bloomed in the Brazilian lands, luminous star that shines in the sky of the church, perfect model of purity and courage for all young people, hear our pleas and present them to the throne of the Most High. Through your powerful intercession, which has already obtained so many graces for those who turn to you, we ask you especially for mention the desired grace here. Amen. Blessed Albertina Berkenbrock, pray for us. My prayer. O Lord our God, with profound gratitude, we lift our hearts to give thanks for the gift of life and the privilege of carrying forth your love through the stories that inspire and transform us. We thank you, Father, for granting us the strength, wisdom, and courage to share the teachings of your gospel through this channel. which has been a beacon of hope and light amidst the adversities of the world. Lord, we recognize that every life is a precious gift, and we are grateful for every moment granted to us to witness and spread your word. May every story told, every message of faith, and every divine teaching reach hearts thirsty for love, truth, and reconciliation. We thank you for the inspiration that guides us, for the blessings that multiply, and for the opportunity to contribute to the dissemination of Christianity, bringing the light of your love to those who seek direction and solace. May these narratives help us touch lives, strengthen faith, and create a united community in the pursuit of peace and truth that only you can offer. May your grace continue to enlighten us, and may we be instruments of your mercy and compassion, reflecting the beauty of your love in every word and gesture. In the name of Jesus, our Savior, we thank you for allowing us to participate in this sacred mission. Amen. In little São Luís, in Santa Catarina, where the wind still whispers among the green hills, the story of Blessed Albertina Berkenbrock remains alive like an eternal flame that never fades. Her life, brief as the blooming of a flower, but intense as the light of 1,000 suns, continues to illuminate the hearts of those who seek authentic examples of courage and faith. Albertina was not just a country girl who lived almost a century ago. She became a universal symbol that holiness knows no boundaries of age, social condition, or historical era. At 12 years old, when most children were still discovering the world through innocent games, she faced the supreme test of Christian fidelity and emerged victorious, even paying the highest price a human life can offer. Her story echoes through time as a cry of hope for all young people who face moral pressures in an increasingly challenging world. Albertina proved that it is possible to remain pure of heart even when surrounded by evil, that it is possible to choose the right path even when it demands immeasurable sacrifices, that it is possible to be holy even amidst the most ordinary circumstances of daily life. The young martyr's legacy transcends confessional and geographical boundaries. Christians of all denominations find in her journey inspiration to live with greater moral integrity. Educators discover in her biography precious material for forming upright consciences. Families recognize in her parents, Enrique and Maria, examples of how to raise children in evangelical values without depriving them of the natural joy of childhood. Today, when thousands of pilgrims annually visit her sanctuary, when countless graces continue to be reported through her intercession, when young people from all over the world find in her story courage to resist contemporary temptations, it is clearly perceived that Albertina fulfilled a mission that far exceeds the limits of her brief earthly existence. She teaches that true heroism is not found on the grand stages of worldwide fame, but in daily fidelity to Christian principles. That holiness is not a privilege for a chosen few, but a universal call to which everyone can respond. That purity of heart is a more valuable treasure than any material wealth, that it is worth living and, if necessary, dying for what one truly believes in. The little girl from the Santa Catarina hills transformed into a spiritual giant whose example continues to shape consciences and transform lives. Her beatification was merely official recognition of what the people already knew for decades. Albertina is a saint, and her intercession is powerful with God. If this story touched your heart, if the example of Blessed Albertina awakened in you the desire to live with greater Christian authenticity, do not keep this treasure to yourself. Subscribe to the Sacred Stories channel, where inspiring biographies like this come to life through carefully crafted narratives. Share this video with friends and family who may benefit from the luminous example of this young martyr. Leave your like so that more people can discover these pearls of Christian spirituality. The transformative power of the saints' stories lies not only in knowing them, but in living them, in allowing their examples to shape our own moral decisions, in letting their courage inspire our courage, that their fidelity strengthen our fidelity. And now, a question for reflection. In your own life, when faced with difficult moral choices, would you have Albertina's same courage to choose what is right, even if it required great personal sacrifices? Share your reflection in the comments and help enrich the dialogue about how to live Christian values in the contemporary world. Don't forget to watch the video specially selected for you that appears above, another sacred story that will surely touch your heart and strengthen your faith. Until the next encounter with Sacred Stories.